Hello everyone, I am Mr. Night Truth. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and let's go down into the story.
Story number 1. Imagine being sent to the edge of the world, a frozen, secret military outpost in Alaska, where silence feels heavier than snow, and survival depends on rules no one will explain, rules that sound insane at first. Never step outside after midnight. Never answer the radio unless a call sign is given. And above all, never, under any circumstance, enter Building 6. For Ethan Cole, a young soldier stationed there, these rules seemed like paranoia until the voices came, voices whispering through dead radios, voices calling him by name. And one by one, the soldiers who broke the rules began to disappear. Tonight, you'll hear Ethan's story of betrayal, forbidden truths, and the price of survival in a place where even the military fears what lurks in the dark. A story where the rules aren't just strange. They're the only thing standing between life, death, and something far worse. The plane cut through the night like a blade, its rattling metal belly holding just one passenger, Ethan Cole. He pressed his forehead against the frost-lined window, searching the endless white void below, nothing but ice, mountains, and darkness. That was Alaska, vast, frozen, and indifferent. And somewhere inside it, hidden from maps and whispers alike, was the outpost he had been ordered to call home. Ethan's orders were classified. His transport had no insignia. Even the pilot never spoke to him. That silence grew heavier as the plane touched down on a narrow strip of ice, the landing jarring, the echo of screeching wheels disappearing into the endless wilderness. When the door opened, the cold hit him like a physical blow, sharp, punishing, alive. He stepped out into a world that didn't want him there. A figure waited near the edge of the strip, breath curling in the dark. A man in a heavy parka, face hidden behind goggles and frost. His voice, when it came, was as cold as the air. Cole, Ethan nodded. Follow me. Don't stray. Out here, the snow takes people faster than a bullet. The man didn't give his name, didn't ask Ethan's. They walked in silence across the ice, boots crunching, wind howling like a living thing. The only light came from a dim string of bulbs leading them toward a cluster of squat, metallic buildings half buried in snowdrifts. The place looked less like a base and more like a graveyard of machines abandoned to the elements. Inside the main building, warmth returned in choking waves, the heat almost unbearable after the bite of the tundra. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled of metal, oil, and something else. Stale, suffocating, like secrets kept too long. The man finally removed his goggles, revealing grey eyes that seemed permanently narrowed by suspicion. Rules, he said flatly, handing Ethan a folded slip of paper. Memorize them. Live by them, or you won't last a week here. Ethan unfolded the paper, brow furrowing as he read. Rule number 1, never go outside after midnight. Rule number 2, do not answer the radio unless a proper call sign is used. Rule number 3, never enter Building 6. He looked up, half expecting the man to smirk, to admit it was some hazing ritual. Instead, the man's expression stayed dead, hollow, unflinching. You're serious? Ethan asked. The man's voice was iron. Dead serious. People who break the rules don't come back. Or worse, they come back wrong. Before Ethan could press further, the man turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the corridor with the paper trembling between his fingers. His quarters were small, a metal bunk, a desk, and a locker that rattled whenever the wind howled against the outer walls. He set his bag down, rubbed his hands over his face, and tried to laugh off the warning. Rules like these belonged in ghost stories, not a US military installation. Midnight curfews, haunted radios, forbidden buildings. It all sounded absurd. But that night, sleep refused to come. The outpost groaned around him, as though the ice itself pressed against the walls. Pipes hissed. The wind shrieked in unnatural tones, almost human, almost words. He lay awake staring at the ceiling until the thin watch on his wrist ticked toward midnight. That's when it started. A sharp crackle filled the air. At first, Ethan thought it was a dream, but then he realized it was coming from the radio on, the desk across the room. He hadn't touched it. He hadn't even powered it on. Yet the speaker hissed, alive with static. Through the noise, a voice whispered, "Help me!" Ethan froze. His breath hitched, chest rising and falling too fast. The voice was faint, distorted, but desperate. A man, pleading, choking on his words. "Please, they're outside." Ethan swung his legs off the bed, heart hammering. He knew the second rule. He hadn't even memorized it on purpose, yet it rang inside his skull. Do not answer the radio unless a proper call sign is used, and the voice had given none. The hiss grew louder, the voice breaking, sobbing. "Now, cold. Don't let them in. Don't." Ethan's hand hovered over the radio. Every instinct screamed to answer, to ask who it was, to help. But then, something else. A shift in tone. The pleading voice faltered, replaced by a low, rasping chuckle, the kind of sound that didn't belong to any human throat. "We see you, Ethan." His blood turned to ice. He stumbled back, knocking the chair over, staring at the black, unblinking radio. He hadn't given his name to anyone, not even the man who brought him here. The static cut off with a violent snap. Silence swallowed the room, heavy and suffocating. Ethan backed into the corner, every nerve screaming. His pulse pounded in his ears, loud enough to drown out the wind. For the first time, the rules no longer felt absurd. They felt like the only thing keeping him alive. But as he stared at the dead radio, its light flickering faintly, he realized something else. The voice hadn't just known his name. It had sounded like it was inside the room. He lay awake the rest of the night, clutching the slip of paper with the rules until his knuckles turned white. Sleep never came. Instead, he listened to the building groan and the wind whisper through the frozen dark, waiting for something he couldn't see but could feel breathing against the walls. And deep down, he already knew. Whatever this place was hiding, it would not let him leave untouched. It was only his first night. The morning after his first night, Ethan looked like a man who had seen a ghost. His uniform clung to him in stiff lines, eyes bloodshot, lips cracked from biting down on them all night. The others at the mess hall noticed, but no one asked. That silence was the first thing he began to understand about the outpost. Questions were as dangerous as answers. Only one man spoke to him, a broad-shouldered veteran with a scar that cut across his chin and disappeared under his collar. He slid onto the bench across from Ethan and began eating without a word. For a while, the only sound was the scraping of utensils on metal trays. Finally, the man said, "You heard it, didn't you?" Ethan's hand froze mid-air, spoon hovering over cold eggs. "What do you mean?" The man's eyes, grey and sharp, locked on his. The radio. A shiver ran through Ethan. "Who are you?" "Sergeant Riley. Been here too long. Long enough to know what happens if you don't listen." Ethan leaned closer, lowering his voice. "What was that? Who was it?" Riley shook his head. "Not who, what. And you don't want to know. Just keep the rules. That's how you survive." The conversation ended there, but the seed of dread it planted grew with every passing hour. That night, Ethan sat at his desk, eyes flicking to the radio every few minutes. It stayed silent, cold, as though mocking him. He wanted to believe Riley, that the rules were enough, but Ethan had never been good at blind obedience. He needed to know why. When the clock neared midnight again, the static returned. A low hiss, then a voice, clearer this time. "Please, anyone. They're dragging me into the snow." Ethan clenched his fists. His breath fogged the air. The second rule screamed in his head. Do not answer the radio unless a proper call sign is used, and yet, what if it really was a man out there? What if someone was dying while he sat frozen inside? He forced himself to step back, fists trembling, sweat beading his forehead despite the cold. The voice cried louder, pleading, breaking, until finally it whispered something that shattered him. "Ethan, help me." He staggered back. No one here knew his name. No one could know. The voice wasn't asking anymore. It was baiting him, pressing into his skull like icy fingers. He didn't answer. But someone else did. Across the hall, another. Radio crackled, and a young soldier's voice responded, panic in every word. "This is Private Daniels. Hang on, we're coming." Ethan's blood froze. He yanked open his door, rushing into the corridor. By the time he reached the main entrance, Daniels and another soldier were already stepping into the storm, rifles slung across their shoulders, faces pale but determined. "Wait!" Ethan shouted. "Don't!" The door slammed shut behind them, swallowed by the blizzard. Story number... Hours passed. No one returned. By morning, the outpost was buzzing with tension. A search team went out at dawn and came back hollow-eyed, carrying nothing but a torn glove soaked in blood. Daniels and his partner were gone, swallowed by the storm, or something worse. The commander called it an accident. Disorientation, frostbite. It happens. His voice was clipped, rehearsed, like a man reciting lines he didn't believe. Ethan sat silently, bile burning his throat. The others didn't argue, they just lowered their heads, clung tighter to the rules, as if words on paper could save them. Only Riley caught Ethan's eye across the mess hall, jaw tight, warning etched in his expression. After the room cleared, Riley cornered him. "You, see what happens when you break the rule." "They thought someone needed help," Ethan whispered. "They always think that. That's the trick. That's how it gets you." Riley's voice cracked, just for a second, as Thauto stays still, clutching the rules, whispering them like a prayer. Then, silence. The voice cut out. Ethan's chest heaved. Relief washed through him, but it didn't last, because from somewhere deep in the outpost, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of a door slamming open, then boots crunching in snow. Someone else had broken the rule. Again. By dawn, another bunk was empty. The commander repeated his cold explanation. The soldiers lowered their heads, and Ethan realized something that churned his stomach. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. The rules weren't warnings. They were traps disguised as survival. Every night, the thing outside the wire reached in, testing, whispering, waiting for one of them to slip, and sooner or later they always did. Ethan wasn't sure what terrified him more, the presence in the storm or the knowledge that the people in charge already knew. As he stared at Building 6 through the icy window, half buried in snow and locked with rusted chains, a thought clawed into his mind. If answers existed anywhere, they were in there, and Ethan wasn't sure how much longer he could resist breaking the final rule. Ethan could no longer ignore it. Every night, the whispers clawed at him, dragging soldiers one by one into the storm. Every day, the commander lied through his teeth, stamping accidents on the reports as if words could erase screams. And through it all, Building 6 loomed at the far edge of the compound, half buried in snow, its doors locked with rusted chains, its windows covered in sheets of steel. The rules said never to enter, but rules here were nothing more than shackles, binding men until something outside tore them away. Ethan had lost patience. He needed answers, even if they killed him. That night, when the compound fell into its uneasy silence, he slipped from his bunk. The corridor lights flickered, buzzing, faintly, as if even the electricity resisted being awake at this hour. He pressed forward, boots echoing against the frozen floor, breath misting in the frigid air. Through the main doors and across the yard he moved, the storm biting into his skin. The wind moaned like a grieving woman, dragging his gaze to the shadows beyond the wire fence. For a second, he thought he saw movement out there, tall figures swaying in the snow. But he forced his eyes away and fixed them on Building 6. The padlock was old, corroded. He smashed it with a rock until it cracked. Apart, the sound swallowed by the howling wind. Chains rattled loose. The heavy door groaned open. The stench hit him first, metallic, sour, and heavy with rot. Ethan gagged, pulling his scarf higher over his face. He switched on his flashlight. The beam swept across a narrow hallway lined with peeling paint, icicles dripping from the ceiling. The deeper he moved, the worse the smell grew. His light shook in his trembling hands, and then he froze. There were cells, row after row of reinforced doors with small glass slots, each one frosted and cracked. Ethan's stomach twisted as he peered inside the first. A figure sat slumped in the corner, skin stretched tight over bone, eyes wide open but lifeless, as though frozen mid-scream. He stumbled back, bile rising. The second cell held worse. A soldier, still breathing. His lips were blue, his skin mottled, with frostbite, yet his chest rose and fell in shallow gasps. Shackles bound his wrists. His mouth opened, releasing a sound that wasn't quite human, a rasping plea twisted with something Ethan couldn't name. Kill me. Ethan staggered away, heart pounding so violently it drowned the wind. The rules hadn't been about survival. They had been about containment. The voices, the whispers. They weren't just tricks from outside. They came from here, from these soldiers turned into something else. Something that could slip into radios, into minds, into dreams. As he pushed deeper into the building, he saw more cells. Some empty, walls clawed with fingernail scratches, some holding bodies half consumed by frost, yet still twitching, as though time had refused to let them die. And then he stopped dead. The last cell wasn't locked. Its door hung ajar, and inside stood a man Ethan knew, his father. No, impossible. His father had died years ago in an accident, or so the military had told him. But here he was, standing in the shadows, eyes sunken, face thinner, but unmistakable. "Dad?" Ethan whispered, tears stinging his frozen cheeks. The man smiled faintly, lips cracking. "Ethan, you came." Ethan dropped the flashlight, rushing forward, gripping the bars. "They told me you were dead." "I was. I am. But they wouldn't let me go." His voice trembled, breaking between words. "This place, they keep us, experiment on us, use us." Ethan shook his head violently. "I'll get you out. I'll tell them. No!" His father's voice cracked into a growl that didn't sound like him anymore. "You can't. If you open this door, I won't be your father anymore. I'm already gone." Ethan's chest collapsed under the weight of it. His hands trembled on the icy bars. Why? Why didn't they just end it? His father's eyes gleamed in the dark. "Because the voices are stronger than death. They need vessels. They need us. And soon, they'll need you too." The words sank into Ethan like ice through bone. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind him. Ethan spun, flashlight beams slicing through the dark. Riley stood there, gun in hand, face carved with pain. "I told you not to come here," Riley said hoarsely. "You knew," Ethan shouted. "You knew all along!" Riley's eyes burned. "You think I want this? You think I sleep at night? They keep me alive because I keep the rules. That's the deal. You break them. You're next." Ethan's father began laughing, softly, a chilling, broken sound. "It's too late. He's already chosen." The lights above flickered violently, the air filled with static, that same suffocating hiss from the radio. Shadows slid across the walls, though nothing cast them. Ethan dropped to his knees, covering his ears, but the voices pressed into his skull. "Ethan, stay with us. You belong here now. Never leave." He screamed, pressing his forehead to the cold floor until Riley's hand yanked him up. "Listen to me," Riley shouted over the storm of whispers. "You walk out of this building right now and you never look back. Or you stay, and you end like them." Ethan's eyes locked on his father's, tears streaking his face. His father whispered one last word, lips barely moving. "Run!" Ethan tore himself away, stumbling into the corridor, then into the night. The building's door slammed shut behind him with a final, echoing clang. By dawn, Ethan sat in his bunk, shaking uncontrollably. The rules lay crumpled in his hand, the ink smudged by sweat and tears. He finally understood. They weren't protecting the soldiers from what was outside. They were protecting the world from what was inside. And Ethan knew, with a certainty that hollowed him out, that the voices weren't done with him. Because as the sun bled across the frozen horizon, the radio on his desk crackled to life. One last time. "Welcome home, Ethan," he haunted by some memory he would never share. Ethan swallowed hard. "What is it, Riley?" Riley looked away. "Something that doesn't belong here. That's all you need to know." But Ethan knew. It wasn't enough, not for him. The image of Daniel stumbling into the white abyss burned in his mind. The sound of his terrified voice over the radio replaying again and again. That night, Ethan couldn't resist. He sat awake, waiting. Midnight came like a curse. The static returned. "Ethan!" He bit down on his fist, shaking, refusing to move closer. The voice changed, cracking, shifting between tones. Sometimes a man, sometimes a woman, sometimes something inhuman. "They're here with me. Come outside. Just for a second." The walls of his room creaked. as if something pressed against them from outside. Shadows slid across the frosted window, long, too long, bending in unnatural ways. Ethan forced himself. Story number... They say every diner has it, but what if one of them isn't human? I was just a drifter looking for a paycheck when I took a job at the Moonlight Diner in Florida. It was supposed to be simple. Wash dishes, stay quiet, get paid. But this diner has rules, and breaking them comes with a price. There's a man who sits in booth number 6 every night at exactly 3:13 a.m., drinking black coffee and eating lemon pie. And if you make the mistake of looking at him, he'll see right through you. He'll know every secret you've tried to bury. This is a story about guilt you can't escape, about a place where the walls whisper your sins back to you, and about the night I learned that some rules exist for one reason: to keep you alive. The rain had just stopped, but the smell of wet asphalt clung to the air, thick as smoke. Neon lights buzzed overhead, flickering like a dying heart monitor, throwing green and pink streaks across the empty parking lot. I hesitated under the crooked Moonlight Diner sign, wondering if this was another mistake, one more bad decision to add to a long list. But I was broke, running from something I didn't want to name, and this was the only place that hadn't asked too many questions. Inside, the diner felt like a time capsule no one had bothered to dust off. Vinyl booths, checkerboard floors, dulled by decades of footsteps, and a jukebox in the corner that looked like it hadn't worked since the 70s. The smell of coffee and fried bacon lingered under a layer of cleaning chemicals. I rubbed my hands on my damp jeans, trying to shake the chill. Marlene, the manager, emerged from behind the counter with the stiff posture of someone who hadn't smiled in years. Her dark hair was pulled tight into a bun, and deep shadows pooled under her eyes. She handed me a clipboard before I could even introduce myself. "Sign here," she said, her voice flat, like she'd been rehearsing the same sentence for decades. The contract wasn't a standard employment form. Sure, there was my name and social security line, but below that were rules. Strange, obsessive rules typed in neat bullet points. Never touch the jukebox. Never speak to a customer first. Never, under any circumstance, look directly at the man in booth number 6. I frowned and glanced up, but Marlene's face didn't change. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked. Her eyes flicked past me toward the window, where raindrops still slid lazily down the glass. "No joke," she said, sliding a cheap ballpoint pen across the counter. "We've had problems before. People who don't follow rules don't last long here." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. Still, I signed. My hand shook slightly, not from fear, I told myself, but from exhaustion. She gave me a faded apron and gestured toward the back kitchen. "You'll start tonight. Sinks over there, plates stack here. Keep your head down and don't wander. Off. The night shift gets weird." That last part wasn't reassuring. The back kitchen was small and steamy, walls stained with years of grease that no amount of scrubbing could erase. A rusty fan whirred overhead, struggling against Florida's swampy air. I'd done dishwashing gigs before, but something about this place felt heavier, like the walls themselves were listening. Through the swinging doors, I could hear the clink of silverware and soft murmurs from the dining area. The diner wasn't crowded, but there were always people. Truckers nursing coffee, couples in hushed arguments, lone strangers staring out at the dark highway. None of them looked at me, and I didn't dare look at them for long. Halfway through, my first stack of greasy plates, Marlene appeared again. "Remember the rules," she said quietly. "I'm not about to start serenading the jukebox," I muttered. Her expression didn't flicker. "Just don't test them." and then she was gone, her soft-soled shoes barely making a sound as she disappeared into the dining room. I shook my head and kept scrubbing. It was easier not to think. Sometime past midnight, the diner grew quieter. The highway outside was empty, only the hum of cicadas filling the silence. I peeked through the swinging door and froze. Booth number 6 sat directly in the far corner, under a flickering fluorescent light. And someone was in it. The figure was motionless, head tilted slightly downward, face shadowed beneath the brim of a wide hat. A single mug of black coffee steamed on the table. Nobody else seemed to notice him. Not Marlene at the register, not the lone waitress refilling ketchup bottles. But I couldn't look away. He hadn't been there a moment ago. My palms went clammy. I ducked back into the kitchen, heart hammering. Maybe this was some regular customer. Maybe I was overthinking. But the rule about booth number 6 came back to me, sharp and urgent. Never look at the man. Why? The clock ticked past 2:30 a.m. I tried to focus on my work, but every creak of the diner floorboards made me glance at the swinging doors. Curiosity gnawed at me like a persistent itch. Why would Marlene go to the trouble of writing out that warning if this was just some guy? Finally, I couldn't resist. I pushed the door open just a crack and peered out. The man was still there. He hadn't touched his coffee. He hadn't moved at all. His stillness was unnatural, predatory. Then, as if sensing me, his head turned. I slammed the door shut and stumbled back. My breath came fast and shallow, and I swore I saw something glint beneath the brim of his hat. A faint smile, maybe, or the gleam of his eyes. Marlene appeared a minute later, expression tense. "You saw him?" I didn't answer. "You shouldn't have looked." Her voice was almost a whisper now, the kind of tone someone uses at a funeral. My pulse pounded in my ears. "What's his deal? He's just a customer, right? Keep your head down," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Finish your shift and go home." That should have been enough to scare me straight, but instead, something inside me twisted tighter. Fear mixed with fascination, and I felt like I'd stumbled onto a secret I wasn't supposed to know. I stayed in the kitchen, but every few minutes I caught myself drifting back to that crack in the door, staring at booth number 6, searching for any sign of movement. The man sat there, perfectly still, like he was waiting for something, or someone. By 3:13 a.m., he was gone. No sound of footsteps, no door chime. Just an empty booth with a cold cup of coffee, untouched. I wiped my damp hands on my apron, nerves buzzing. The diner was quiet again, almost too quiet. Outside, the rain started back up, tapping against the glass like restless fingers. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt the first spark of something else, curiosity. I didn't know it yet, but that curiosity would cost me more than I could imagine. The next night, I showed up early for my shift, though I couldn't say why. Maybe I wanted proof that what I'd seen wasn't some sleep-deprived hallucination. Maybe I wanted to believe that man was just a customer passing through. But as I stood under the flickering neon sign of the Moonlight Diner, the Florida humidity clinging to my skin, I couldn't shake the memory of his stillness, or the way Marlene's voice had trembled when she told me I shouldn't have looked. Inside, the diner was as quiet as a chapel. The jukebox in the corner sat covered in a thin layer of dust, just like the night before. The smell of fried grease and old coffee clung to the air, heavy and sour. Marlene barely looked at me as she handed me the apron. "Straight to the kitchen," she said, voice clipped. I obeyed, but my eyes wandered immediately to booth number 6. It was empty. Relief trickled through me. but not enough to calm the thrum of nerves in my chest. Frankie, the fry cook, was already at the grill, humming an off-key tune while flipping burgers. He was a big man, his arms tattooed and his beard streaked with grey. But there was something soft in his eyes. When I walked in, he gave me a look that wasn't unfriendly, just tired. "You're the new guy," he said, voice low. "Name's Frankie." I nodded and reached for the first stack of plates. He glanced at the swinging door, then back at me. "You saw him, didn't you?" My hands froze. "Who?" "Don't play dumb, kid. The guy in booth number 6. Frankie leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You can tell. People get this look after they see him, like they've been somewhere they weren't supposed to go." I forced a laugh. "He's just some weirdo, right? Some local creep." Frankie shook his head slowly. "No, he ain't local. He ain't a creep. He's something else. Nobody knows who he is or why he comes here. But I've seen what happens when people break the rules." My stomach twisted. "What happens?" Frankie's gaze shifted toward the dining area, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Ask Marlene. She's been here longer than all of us. Knows more than she'll say." I wanted to press him for details, but the kitchen door swung open and Marlene stepped inside, her eyes cold and sharp. "Frankie," she said, her tone like steel. "Don't scare the kid." Frankie just shrugged, flipping another burger. I avoided her gaze, pretending to focus on scrubbing a plate. She lingered for a moment, then turned to me. "Do your job. Don't look at him again." Her words sent a chill through me, because she spoke like she knew I wouldn't be able to resist. Hours crawled by, each minute punctuated by the hiss of oil and the clink of dishes. Midnight came and went. Then, just after 3:00 a.m., I felt it. The shift in the air, the strange silence, the way the diner seemed to hold its breath. I peeked through the door. He was there, booth number 6. Same dark hat pulled low over his face, same steaming cup of black coffee. The lemon pie from the night before sat untouched. My heart pounded as I stared at him. His presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore. This time, I didn't look away. His head lifted slightly. Even from across the diner, I felt his gaze land on me like a weight. And then, without warning, he spoke. "You shouldn't be here." The voice was calm, deep, and cold. My chest tightened and I froze. "You don't know me," I managed, my voice shaking. "I know enough," he said softly. "I know what you did." My blood ran cold. Images flashed through my mind. Her face, tear-streaked and furious. The slam of a door, the sound of sirens. I'd left all of that behind. Nobody here knew. Nobody could know. "Who are you?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and ran a finger across the surface of the table. I saw it then, my name carved into the wood of booth number 6, etched deep like it had been there for years. Stumbled backward, crashing into a stack of trays. Marlene's sharp voice cut through the silence. "Back to the kitchen." I turned to her, panicked. "What is this? How does he—" "Go," she hissed. "Now!" Her tone was so harsh, so desperate that I obeyed without another word. Back in the kitchen, Frankie shot me a knowing look. "You talked to him, didn't you?" "He said my name," I whispered, my hands trembling. "How does he know my name?" Frankie sighed, leaning against the counter. "Kid, you don't get it. This place, it's not normal. People come here because they're running from something, but nothing stays buried forever. Not here." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Frankie didn't answer. He just went back to the grill, humming that same off-key tune. The rest of the shift was torture. Every creak of the floor made me jump. I couldn't stop thinking about that voice, that calm certainty. He knew something. He knew everything. When I finally worked up the courage to look again, booth number 6 was empty. Just like the night before, no sound of footsteps, no chime of the door. The pie was gone. The coffee cup sat upside down, a single dark ring of liquid on the table. When the diner finally closed at dawn, Marlene handed me my pay envelope. Her hands trembled as she passed it over. "You need to leave," she said softly. "Don't come back tomorrow. Don't come back at all." Something in her voice made my stomach lurch. "I can't just quit," I said. "I need this job." "You need to stay alive," she whispered, glancing toward the empty booth. "This place, it knows things, and once it knows you, you're not safe." I opened my mouth to protest, but she was already walking away. Outside, the sky was a bruised purple, the sun barely breaking through. I climbed into my car, staring back at the diner one last time. The neon sign buzzed softly, and for a moment I swore I saw a shadow move inside booth number 6. I started the engine and drove off, but the man's voice echoed in my head, steady and cold. "I know what you did," and deep down, I knew I'd be back. I didn't sleep that day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw booth number 6, the untouched pie, the glint of his eyes beneath the brim of that hat, my name carved into the table like a warning from another life. By the time dusk fell, I was sitting in my car outside the Moonlight Diner, chain smoking and trying to convince myself to drive away. But curiosity, fear, and something darker rooted me in place. The diner's neon sign blinked against the heavy, Florida night, casting the empty lot in pink and green light. My reflection in the windshield looked like a stranger's, pale, hollow-eyed, jaw tight. Whatever was inside that diner had sunk its claws into me, and I couldn't leave. Not yet. When I finally stepped inside, Marlene was behind the counter sorting receipts. She froze when she saw me. "I told you not to come back," she said softly, voice shaking just enough to make me pause. "I need answers," I replied. "Who is he? How does he know about me?" Her lips thinned into a hard line. "Some things aren't meant to be understood." "Too late," I muttered, tying on my apron. "I already looked." She stared at me for a long moment, then sighed and gestured toward the back kitchen. "If you stay, don't talk to him again. Don't even glance that way, you hear me?" I nodded, but we both knew it was a lie. Frankie barely looked at me when I entered the kitchen. He was quieter tonight, his usual humming replaced by the rhythmic scrape of his spatula. "You should have listened to her," he said finally. "Nobody leaves this place the same after they meet him. Some don't leave at all." "What is he?" I whispered. Frankie hesitated. "Not what? Who?" He looked at me then, his eyes heavy with something that felt like pity. "He's not here to eat pie or drink coffee. He's here for people like you. People like me? The ones running. The guilty ones." His words clung to me like smoke as I washed dishes in silence. Outside the kitchen doors, the diner buzzed with late-night regulars. A trucker slumped over his coffee, a woman in sunglasses sipping tea, a teenage couple sharing fries. None of them seemed real anymore. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the shift in the air came again. The hum of conversation dulled, the buzzing neon lights faltered, and I knew, without even looking, that booth number 6 was occupied. My breath hitched. I wiped my hands on my apron and pushed the kitchen door open, just a sliver. He was there. Same hat, same stillness, same untouched pie. And though I hadn't made a sound, his head turned slowly toward me. This time, I didn't hide. I stepped out into the diner, ignoring Marlene's sharp intake of breath. She stood frozen behind the counter, her hand gripping a coffee pot, like a weapon she knew wouldn't help. I walked toward booth number 6. The man smiled faintly, motioning for me to sit. My body moved before my mind caught up, sliding into the booth across from him. Up close, he smelled faintly of rain and old wood. "You came back," he said, voice calm and deliberate. "I want answers," I managed. "You already know the answers," he replied. You just don't want to face them. I swallowed hard, heat rising in my chest. What are you talking about? The man tilted his head. The woman, the car crash. You left her there. My heart stopped. It was like a dam breaking. The memories I'd buried came rushing back. The fight, her tears, the screech of tires. I saw myself stumbling from the wreck, dazed but alive. I remembered the sound of her screaming, trapped in the driver's seat. And I remembered running until my lungs burned, leaving her to die in the twisted wreckage. No, I whispered. That's not... It's the truth, he said simply. The diner was silent. Even the clatter of dishes had stopped. I realized every customer was staring at me, their faces expressionless, blank. Marlene appeared beside me, her face pale, but determined. She placed a trembling hand on my shoulder. This is what I tried to protect you from, she said softly. He's here for justice. Justice. My voice cracked. I made a mistake. I panicked. I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't matter here, the man interrupted. His voice was like a judge's gavel, calm, final. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. Please, I can't. You can confess, Marlene said gently, or you can pay another way. Another way? Blood, the man said. The air in the diner grew heavier, thicker. The lights flickered, and in their glow, I saw something impossible. The customers around us weren't people anymore. Their faces were grey, features blurred like water-smudged portraits. They weren't eating or drinking. They were waiting. I bolted from the booth, stumbling backward. Stay away from me. But the man didn't move. He simply raised one finger and pointed at me. My chest tightened, as if invisible hands were squeezing my lungs. I gasped, clutching my ribs. You can't outrun guilt, he said softly. Marlene stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Please, she whispered to him. Let him choose. He studied me for a moment, then lowered his hand. The pressure vanished, and I collapsed to the floor, wheezing. You have until sunrise, he said. Decide. I stumbled into the kitchen, grabbing a chef's knife from the counter. My reflection stared back at me in the blade, pale, sweaty, wild-eyed. Frankie leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. You're gonna do it, huh? He said quietly. What choice do I have? Frankie sighed. Nobody ever chooses confession. I don't remember much after that, just flashes. The feel of the knife handle in my sweaty grip. The sound of footsteps. A scream. Maybe mine, maybe Marlene's. The coppery smell of blood mixing with fryer grease. When the haze cleared, I was back in the kitchen, hands slick with crimson. The diner was silent again, eerily so. Booth nurse 6 was empty. At dawn, Marlene found me sitting at the counter, trembling. She didn't ask what I'd done. She just placed a cup of black coffee in front of me. It's over, she said softly. He looked toward the door. A help wanted sign hung crooked in the window, glowing under the neon light. The diner was already ready for its next victim, and I knew I'd never leave. Story number... The shift began the way it always did. Too quiet, too heavy, as if the concrete walls of the dam pressed in on Ethan's chest. 32 years old and already worn down, he told himself this job was temporary, just a paycheck, nothing more. But every time he walked into the control room, with its hum of outdated machinery and the endless roar of water outside, he felt swallowed by something bigger, older, and darker than he could name. Wallace was waiting, for him, leaning against the panel of blinking lights. The supervisor's face was weathered like the dam itself, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his cap. He never wasted words. Same rules as always, Wallace said, jerking his chin toward the laminated sheet taped above the control board. Ethan glanced at it, though he already knew the words by heart. The rules. They'd been there since his first shift 6 months ago. The men laughed about them during the day, but at night, no one joked. Never speak to anyone who knocks on the control room door after midnight. Never go down to the spillway alone. Never turn your back on the water. Wallace's voice cut into his thoughts. You follow them. You go home in the morning. You don't. He gave a thin smile, one Ethan couldn't read. See you at dawn. The door slammed, leaving Ethan alone with the buzzing lights and the endless churn of turbines. He told himself it was nonsense, some twisted tradition meant to keep rookies in line. Yet as the hours dragged past, the rules pressed heavier on his mind. Midnight was approaching. The red digits of the clock above the door ticked closer, louder, until the sound blended with his pulse. Ethan sipped stale coffee, trying to focus on the monitors. Readings looked fine. Levels steady, no alarms. Still, unease knotted in his gut. The dam had a way of making a man feel small, like every drop of water pressing against its walls was watching, waiting. Then, 3 knocks. Ethan froze, the cup halfway to his lips. They were soft, but deliberate, echoing in the steel door of the control room. His breath hitched. Midnight had passed 10 minutes ago. The knock came again, louder this time. He swallowed hard, his gaze snapping to the posted rule. Never speak to anyone who knocks after midnight. It was probably Wallace testing him, or a drunk fisherman who'd lost his way. That's what he told himself, but his hands still trembled as he set the coffee down. Hello? The voice outside was muffled, but clear enough to curl into his spine. Male, low, unfamiliar. Let me in. It's freezing out here. Ethan's throat tightened. He stood, one step closer to the door before catching himself. The rule burned in his head, knuckles rapped again, harder, impatient. I know you hear me. Ethan backed away slowly, heart hammering, the voice following him across the room. He didn't answer, couldn't. The silence between each knock stretched thinner, sharper, until the air itself felt ready to split. And then, nothing. The control room went dead quiet. The only sound was the water's endless roar beyond the dam walls. Ethan forced himself back into the chair, chest heaving. His eyes lingered on the steel door, waiting, knowing this wasn't over. Somewhere beyond it, something had learned his name. Ethan barely slept the next day. Even after leaving the dam, the phantom sound of knuckles against steel echoed in his ears. By the time dusk fell and he drove the winding road back to the site, his stomach churned with dread. He told himself he wouldn't let the rules get to him. But the closer he got, the heavier the air became, thick with the damp scent of water and concrete. Wallace wasn't there to greet him. That was unusual. Normally, the old man barked orders, offered half-hearted warnings, then disappeared. Tonight, the control room was empty, the sheet of rules fluttering faintly in the draft. He almost welcomed the solitude, until he saw her. Through the control room's window, down by the spillway, a figure moved along the narrow catwalk. A woman, dark hair, pale in the security floodlights, her steps too slow, as if she were fighting the wind. Ethan squinted. Nobody was supposed to be down there, not alone, not at night. Rule 2. Never go down to the spillway alone. A prickle of unease climbed his spine. Against his better judgment, he unlocked the side door and stepped into the cold. The roar of the dam thundered louder here, the night air laced with spray. "Hey!" he called out. His voice barely carried. "You can't be down there." The woman stopped. Slowly she turned her face toward him. Even at a distance, Ethan felt a chill. It wasn't surprise or fear in her expression, but recognition. "You're Ethan," she said, her voice carrying strangely clear over the water. He froze. She knew his name. "You need to leave," he called back, forcing firmness into his tone. "It's not safe here." Her lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "Not safe? For who?" The lights flickered. For a heartbeat, she vanished into darkness. When they came back on, she was closer, standing at the railing, hair plastered to her face by the mist. "Wallace didn't tell you everything, did he?" she asked. Ethan's pulse spiked. He stepped back toward the control room, glancing at the sheet of rules taped inside the window. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You will." Her eyes glistened with something between grief and rage. "The rules aren't to keep you safe. They're to keep their secrets buried." A deep metallic groan rumbled through the dam, vibrating beneath Ethan's boots. The woman's gaze snapped upward, toward the control tower, then back to him. "Ask him about the third rule," she said sharply, almost pleading, "before it's too late." The floodlights cut out. Blackness swallowed the spillway, the roar of water the only thing left. Ethan's hands fumbled in the dark, searching for the door. When the emergency lights flickered back on, the catwalk was empty. The woman was gone, but her voice lingered in his head, louder than the dam itself. "The rules aren't to protect you. They're to protect them." By the time Wallace returned the next night, Ethan was already on edge. The sheet of rules still clung to the wall, but now every line felt less like warning and more like confession. Wallace lumbered into the control room with his usual grim face, but Ethan noticed something new, a faint tremor in his hands. "You look like hell," Wallace muttered, tossing his jacket onto a chair. "I saw someone," Ethan said flatly. "Down by the spillway." For a moment, Wallace froze. Then he turned slowly, his jaw tightening. "What did she say?" The question wasn't who, but what. That told Ethan everything. "She knew my name," Ethan pressed. "Said the rules aren't here to protect us. They're protecting you." Wallace's face hardened into stone. He stepped closer, his boots echoing against the steel floor. "You'll follow the rules, boy, or you'll end up like the others." "The others?" Ethan's chest tightened. "What did you do to them?" Wallace's lip curled. "Third rule, you should have read it better." Ethan's eyes darted to the paper on the wall. Rule 3. Never open the water gates after midnight, no matter who orders you. He swallowed hard. "Why?" Wallace leaned in, voice low, heavy with menace. "Because what's under that water is meant to stay under. But some people, like your little visitor, can't let go. And when they can't, we help them sink." The truth hit Ethan like ice water. The missing workers, the strange disappearances whispered about in town. It wasn't accidents, it was cover-ups. Bodies buried beneath tons of black water, their stories silenced by concrete and steel. Ethan's stomach lurched, rage and terror knotting together. You killed them. Wallace didn't flinch. I kept order. His hand tightened on Ethan's shoulder. And now you'll do the same, or the dam takes you too. A heavy silence pressed in. The roar of water beyond the walls seemed to swell, drowning out Ethan's frantic heartbeat. Then, bang! A sharp knock on the control room door. Ethan froze. Midnight, the first rule. The knock came again, harder, urgent, a woman's voice. Ethan, don't let him do it. Wallace's grip tightened. Don't answer. But Ethan's resolve snapped. He shoved Wallace back, the older man stumbling against the console. Alarms blared as buttons were struck. Lights flickered red across the room. The knocking turned to pounding. Ethan lunged for the door. Wallace roared behind him, but Ethan was faster. He yanked it open. No one was there, just the echo of water and wind. And then, faintly, from the spillway below. The gates, Ethan. Open the gates. Wallace scrambled to his feet, face twisted in fury. Don't you dare! Ethan's hands hovered over the controls. For a heartbeat, time froze. Between survival and truth, silence and justice. Then he slammed the lever down. The dam shuddered as steel groaned. Water exploded through the gates, a deafening roar that drowned Wallace's scream. The old man clawed at Ethan's arm, but the torrent tore through, unstoppable, devouring the secrets buried beneath. When the floodlights flickered back on, Wallace was gone, swallowed by the water he'd used to hide so many sins. Ethan stood, alone in the crimson glow of the alarms, chest heaving, drenched in spray. The rules still hung on the wall, their ink bleeding from the damp. One by one, he tore them down. The dam roared on, but it no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a reckoning. Story number. The desert stretched for miles in every direction, black and endless. The highway a thin scar cutting through it. Neon buzzed weakly over the truck stop canopy, casting a pale blue glow over cracked asphalt. Ethan leaned against the counter inside, trying to shake the thought that he'd made a mistake. The job had seemed simple. Work nights, keep the place clean, pump fuel if someone asked. After everything that had gone wrong, his girlfriend walking out, his bills piling up, he needed the money. Still, something about this place didn't feel like a new beginning. It felt like a cage. Cal, his boss, had given him the tour in silence. A tall man with a thick mustache and eyes that never softened, he moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this for decades. At the end, he stopped in the tiny office and pointed to a sheet of paper taped crookedly to the wall. Read it, Cal said. His voice was gravel. Ethan stepped closer. The paper was yellowing, the corners curling. The words were typed, blunt and strange. Rule 1. Never ask truckers where they're coming from or where they're headed. Rule 2. Never touch abandoned cargo. Ever. Rule 3. Don't go near pump 6 after midnight. Rule 4. If someone leaves without paying, let them. Don't chase. Ethan frowned. Are these jokes? Cal's eyes narrowed. They ain't. You follow them. You keep your job. You don't. You won't last a week." The words sank heavier than they should have. Ethan wanted to press, but something about Cal's stare made him swallow the questions. He nodded. By 11, Cal had driven off, leaving Ethan alone with the hum of refrigerators and the occasional clink of metal as the building settled. He tried distracting himself, stacking shelves, wiping counters, but his gaze kept sliding, back to the rules on the wall. At midnight, headlights cut across the parking lot. A long-haul truck rumbled up to pump number 6, its engine coughing before it stilled. Ethan's stomach tightened. The number burned in his mind. Pump number 6. The driver stepped out, a man in a greasy ball cap with shoulders like slabs of stone. He didn't look Ethan's way as he fueled, but when he finally entered the store, his eyes caught him sharp and heavy. "Pump 6, the man said. His voice was low, almost a growl. "You gonna unlock it for me, kid?" Ethan froze. The register. Light flickered above him. It's already unlocked." The man smirked faintly. "That's not what I mean." He leaned in close, breath sour with coffee and smoke. "Go check the line for me. Out back. Won't take you a minute." Ethan's pulse raced. Rule 3 thundered in his head. Don't go near pump number 6 after midnight. Every instinct screamed to refuse. But the man's stare held a weight, like saying no wasn't an option. "I can't," Ethan said finally, voice breaking. The driver's smile vanished. He tapped the counter once, slow and deliberate, then turned and walked out into the night. Through the glass, Ethan watched him climb back into his rig. But instead of pulling away, the man just sat there, headlights on, engine idling. Watching the station, watching him. The neon above buzzed louder, flickering. Ethan's hands shook as he turned back to the rules on the wall, suddenly certain they weren't meant to protect the business. They were meant to protect him. Ethan didn't sleep the next day. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the trucker's face, those cold eyes, the way he'd sat in the cab staring at him, headlights burning holes in the dark. When morning finally bled into the desert, the rig was gone, but the unease remained. By the time his second shift began, the rules on the wall felt heavier, like accusations instead of warnings. He couldn't shake the thought that pump number 6 wasn't just broken equipment, but something deliberately avoided. And the way Cal had barked at him about the rules, there was knowledge in that, not superstition. At 1 a.m., the lot was quiet. A thin wind cut across the sand, rattling the aluminum siding. Ethan brewed coffee and tried to lose himself in the hum of the cooler when he noticed it. A trailer parked at the far edge of the property. No cab, just a long white box squatting in the dark. It hadn't been there yesterday. The coffee burned his tongue, but he hardly noticed. Rule 2 whispered in his memory. Never touch abandoned cargo. Ever. His chest tightened. Maybe Cal had meant something like this. Maybe. But how? Often did trailers appear out of nowhere? Ethan told himself to ignore it, to do his job, to keep his head down. But curiosity dug into him like a hook. By 2, he couldn't sit still anymore. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the night. The trailer loomed larger as he approached, its sides streaked with rust, the padlock on its doors gleaming under the beam. The desert was so still that his footsteps sounded too loud, crunching gravel like gunshots. He hesitated, heart racing, then pulled at the latch. It gave with almost no resistance. The doors creaked open, and a breath of stale air poured out. The beam of his flashlight cut into the darkness. Blood. Dark stains soaked into the wooden floor, dried to a brown-black crust. Tarps were piled in the corner, stiff with the same color. His stomach lurched, bile rising in his throat. Then he saw them, photographs scattered across the mess. Women, dozens of them, smiling headshots, driver's licenses, snapshots of families. Some faces he recognized from posters he'd seen in gas stations. Missing, last seen in Nevada. His hand shook so violently, the flashlight danced across the walls. This wasn't forgotten cargo. This was evidence. Behind him, gravel crunched. Ethan spun, light cutting across the lot, but saw no one. His pulse thundered in his ears. He slammed the doors shut, fumbling with the lock, then sprinted back to the store. Inside, the neon buzzed overhead, mocking his panic. He barely made it behind the counter when headlights swept across the window. Cal's truck. The older man walked in, eyes immediately narrowing at Ethan's pale face. "You've been out there," he said flatly. Not a question, a statement. Ethan swallowed hard. "That trailer. There's blood, Cal. Pictures of women. What the hell is going on here?" Cal's jaw tightened. For a long moment, he just stared, then exhaled through his nose. "That's why we have rules, boy," he said, voice low. "Because some cargo don't belong to you, and some questions don't have answers you want." Ethan's skin went cold. The way Cal spoke, it wasn't surprise, it was knowledge. And suddenly, Ethan understood. The rules weren't just there to keep him alive. They were there to keep him quiet. The rest of the shift dragged like a noose tightening around Ethan's neck. Cal had said nothing more, just brewed himself coffee and sat at the corner booth, staring out at the dark desert as if waiting for something. Ethan couldn't stop shaking. Every time he thought of the photographs, the blood, the trailer, he felt the ground beneath him tilt. He wanted to leave, just grab his car and vanish down the highway. But the memory of the trucker from the night before kept him still. "Go near. Pump Nutter 6 after midnight." The words throbbed in his skull. They weren't warnings, they were signals, instructions. At 3 a.m., headlights appeared on the horizon, slicing through the desert black. A semi pulled into the lot, chrome gleaming under the canopy lights. It rolled to a slow stop right at Pump Them 6 Ethan's stomach. Twisted, Cal stood, cracked his knuckles, and said only one thing: "Stay inside. Don't move." But Ethan couldn't. He watched through the glass as the driver climbed out. A man built like steel, his face shadowed beneath a cap. Together, Cal and the driver walked to the back of the trailer. They didn't bother with fuel. They went straight to the lock. Metal clanged. A heavy door slid. Ethan strained his eyes but could only glimpse dark shapes shifting inside. Chains rattled. A muffled cry. His chest seized. People. There were people in there. The rules screamed at him to sit down, keep his mouth shut, survive. But another voice rose, louder, the voice of every missing face on those photographs. Justice wasn't going to come from anywhere else. He moved before he could stop himself. Bursting out the door, he shouted, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Both men froze. Cal's face darkened. "Ethan, go back inside." The driver stepped forward, pulling something from his jacket, cold steel glinting under the lights. A knife. Kid doesn't understand the rules, the driver muttered. Ethan's heart pounded so hard it hurt. They're people, Cal. They're not cargo. Cal's expression shifted. Anger, then something colder, almost pity. This place runs because people like me know when to shut up. You break the rules, you break the whole machine. And the machine doesn't forgive! The driver lunged. Instinct took over. Ethan grabbed the iron tire rod leaning by the pump and swung. Metal cracked bone. The driver crumpled, blood pooling fast across the concrete. Cal's roar cut through the night. He rushed forward, fists like hammers, but Ethan shoved him back against the rig. "You knew!" he shouted, voice shaking. "You've always known!" Cal's face twisted with fury. "I made the rules, and you just signed your death sentence." The fight blurred, grunts, the stench of fuel, the sharp sting of knuckles across his jaw. Ethan swung wildly, adrenaline drowning out pain, until Cal's body hit the pavement. Still. Silence followed. Only the hiss of wind across the desert remained. Ethan staggered toward the open trailer. Inside, eyes blinked at him. Frightened, hollow faces of women bound in shadows. His hands shook as he pulled at the chains. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're safe now." But in his chest, he knew it wasn't true. Cal had said the machine didn't forgive, and Ethan had just broken it wide open. The rules were shattered, and now something bigger was coming. Story number 3. The night she arrived, silence felt heavier than grief. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the kind that pressed against her chest, daring her to breathe too loud. Claire dragged her suitcase across the warped wooden porch of her grandfather's mountain lodge, each step echoing like a reminder of how alone she was. She told herself this was supposed to be a fresh start. The breakup, the betrayal, the sleepless nights in her apartment. It all drove her here, but standing before the door, staring at the rusted key in her hand, she wondered if she had traded heartbreak for something far worse. The lock turned reluctantly, and the door opened to darkness. Dust drifted in the air like the lodge itself had been holding its breath, waiting for her return. The smell of cedar and ash from a fireplace, long unused, clung to the walls. She flicked the light switch. Nothing. The bulbs had burned out years ago. With only her phone's glow to guide her, she stepped inside. Her grandfather had died 3 months earlier, and though she hadn't been close to him in his final years, the house still carried pieces of him. His boots sat by the hearth, scuffed and worn. A half-empty bottle of whiskey rested on the mantel, as though he might come back for one last sip. The stillness unsettled her. It was too preserved, too watchful. She set her bag down and noticed something strange on the dining table. Leather-bound journal, cracked with age, resting exactly in the center as if placed there deliberately. She hesitated before picking it up, her fingers trembling. Inside, his handwriting slanted hard, urgent, rules for the lodge. Her throat tightened as she read the first one aloud, whispering into the shadows. Rule 1. Lock the front door before sundown. Always. She glanced over her shoulder. The door behind her was shut, but unlocked. Frowning, she quickly slid the bolt into place, her chest tightening as if she had already done something wrong. Turning back to the book, she continued. Rule 2. Do not enter the cellar after dark. Her brows knit together. The cellar. She hadn't even thought of it in years. the heavy door beneath the kitchen stairs, the one her grandfather always kept chained. Rule 3. Never answer the knock after midnight. She let out a shaky laugh. What kind of rules are these? She whispered, as if saying it aloud might break their hold. But the laughter faded quickly when she reached the last line on the page. The ink was darker here, pressed into the paper as if he had carved the warning. Rule 4. If you hear your name whispered, do not follow. Her skin prickled. She snapped the journal shut and set it down, forcing herself to breathe. These were just the ramblings of a paranoid old man, she told herself. A man who lived too long in isolation, haunted by his own thoughts. And yet, standing there in the flickering glow of her phone, Claire couldn't ignore the detail that unsettled her most. The first rule was already broken. The sun had gone down an hour ago, and the door had been unlocked when she arrived. The first sound came just after midnight, too soft to be wind, too deliberate to be chance. Claire shot upright in bed, heart pounding, the journal's warnings echoing in her skull. The lodge was supposed to be empty. Still, the sound persisted, a faint creak of floorboards somewhere below, as if someone were moving carefully, trying not to be heard. She clutched the blanket tighter, convincing herself it was only the house settling, but the silence that followed felt staged, like someone holding their breath with her. She told herself not to panic. Her grandfather had always been strict, almost paranoid about order. He hated unlocked doors, hated strange noises, hated things out of place. Maybe that's why he wrote the rules, she thought, pressing a hand against her racing chest. Rules gave him control in the chaos of solitude, but for her, they felt like traps tightening around her throat. Unable to stay still, Claire crept down the hallway, the boards groaning beneath her bare feet. Shadows stretched long and warped in the faint glow of a single candle she'd lit in the kitchen. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she froze. The cellar door stood at the end of the hall, its chain rattling faintly, though no one touched it. Her breath hitched. She moved closer, noticing something she swore hadn't been there before. Gouges, deep and uneven, clawing up the wood as though something had tried to escape from the inside. She stepped back, pulse hammering in her ears. The candle flickered violently, then steadied. That was when the knocking came. 3 sharp raps. Her blood turned to ice. The sound wasn't from the cellar, but from the front door. The same door she had locked, the one the rules demanded she never open after sundown. Her grandfather's words screamed in her memory. Never answer the knock after midnight. The knocks came again, harder this time. Claire staggered back, her trembling hand reaching for her phone on the counter. She dialed quickly, whispering into the receiver when her best friend answered. "Jenny, it's me. I'm not alone here. Someone's at the door." Static hissed through the line, then silence. Her friend's voice cut in briefly, panicked. "Claire, your voice sounds..." Before the call went dead. Claire's stomach lurched. She stared at the phone screen. No signal. The knocking stopped, replaced by something worse. A whisper, drifting through the hallway, soft, deliberate. Her name. Claire. The sound crawled along the walls, sliding past her ears, sinking deep into her spine. She clamped her hands over her head, shaking it violently. No, it's not real," she muttered, her voice breaking. But the whisper came again, closer now, as if spoken just behind her shoulder. She spun, candle trembling in her grip. Nothing. Only shadows shifting, stretching, bending with her fear. For a long moment, the house fell silent again. No knocks, no whispers, just her ragged breathing. She backed away from the cellar door, forcing herself upstairs. But as she reached her bedroom, the journal lay open on the nightstand, though she knew she had left it closed. A single line was written in fresh ink beneath the final rule. Voices will come for you. Do not follow them into the dark. The journal's new warning burned into her mind like fire she couldn't put out. Claire sat frozen on the edge of the bed, staring at the fresh ink that hadn't been there before. The candle guttered low beside her, shadows slithering across. The cabin walls. She couldn't explain it. Someone else had to be inside the lodge. Someone who knew the rules. Someone who wanted her to read them. Her grandfather's voice returned in memory, stern and unyielding. A house without rules is a house that eats itself alive. She had laughed at him once for saying that. Now, the words felt like a curse. Downstairs, floorboards groaned. Not the random sigh of an old building, but deliberate steps. She rose slowly, every instinct screaming at her to stay put. Instead, she grabbed the candle and moved toward the sound, her bare feet cold against the wood. The cellar door was open, her stomach twisted. She knew she had seen the chain intact before, rattling on its hook. Now it dangled loose, the door yawning into a mouth of blackness. From below, a draft carried the faintest trace of smoke and something sour, like rotting wood. And then came the voice. Not whispered this time, but clear, male, low. "You shouldn't have come back here, Claire." She nearly dropped the candle. "Who's there?" Her voice cracked. Silence stretched. Then a figure emerged from the dark stairwell. A man, lean and weathered, his face gaunt in the flickering light. His eyes were sharp, almost feverish, and Claire's blood went cold when recognition hit. Her uncle. A man she hadn't seen in years, the one her grandfather never spoke of. "You were never meant to find the rules," he said softly, stepping closer. "He wrote them for me, to keep me in line, to keep me quiet." Claire's throat tightened. "Why? What happened down there?" A shadow passed across his face. "Your grandfather. He took something that wasn't his. A woman. My mother. His affair ruined this family. And when the truth came out, he locked me away with his guilt. Those rules? They weren't protection. They were a prison." Her candle flickered, the flame nearly dying. The walls seemed to close in, groaning with secrets. "You killed him," she whispered. A smile twisted his mouth. "He made the rules. I only broke them." Her chest tightened, panic clawing at her ribs. She stepped back, but his voice followed, almost tender. "And now you've broken them too." The door unlocked. The cellar opened. "You heard the voices. That means you belong here, just like me." Claire bolted, racing for the front door, the journal clutched in her hand. The knocking returned, violent this time, shaking the wood on, its hinges. She froze. Outside or inside, there was danger. The rules had trapped her, given her no escape. Behind her, her uncle's voice carried one last truth. The last rule was never written in ink. It's simple, Claire. No one leaves this house alive. The candle went out. Story number 4. The first thing Lucas noticed wasn't the silence. It was the way it pressed against him, heavy and deliberate, as if the library itself was listening. He had known quiet before, the battlefield kind, where every sound meant danger. But this was different. It was the sort of silence that felt designed. He had taken the job out of desperation. Nights suited him. No co-workers to deal with. No bustling crowds to spike his anxiety. 32, with military service and too many shadows following him, Lucas just wanted work where no one asked questions. The university library seemed perfect. A paycheck for walking halls and watching cameras. Simple. That assumption shattered when his supervisor handed him a laminated sheet of paper. "Read these carefully," the man said, his voice flat. "Follow them, no matter what." Lucas scanned the list. Rule 1. Never answer the phones after midnight. Rule 2. If you hear voices between the stacks, do not investigate. Rule 3. Stay away from the basement after dark. He frowned, half smirking. Is this some kind of hazing thing? The supervisor's expression didn't change. His eyes stayed locked, unblinking. Just follow them, that's all you need to know. And then he left, footsteps fading until Lucas was alone with the rules clutched in his hand. For the first hour, he tried to convince himself it was nothing more than campus folklore. Students loved ghost stories. Maybe the staff kept the legend alive to keep rookies on edge. He sat at the security desk, watching the monitors. Endless rows of bookshelves filled the grainy screens, all empty. But at 12:17 a.m., Lucas froze. A whisper slipped through the air, faint, like someone murmuring. In the next room, he lifted his head. The sound didn't come from the monitors. It came from the building itself. He stood, scanning the office. Nothing. His pulse quickened. He remembered Rule 2, and for the first time, it didn't feel funny. Lucas walked the perimeter, boots echoing softly against the tiled floor. The lights flickered overhead, buzzing like tired insects. He paused at the entrance to the restricted archives, an iron-barred gate locked with chains. No students were allowed there, yet in the corner of his eye, he caught something, the brief sweep of movement, like a shadow ducking between shelves. His throat tightened. He turned sharply, staring into the rows. Empty. Just the dead weight of dust and forgotten books. The whispering returned, clearer this time, threading through the air. Words half-formed, like breath against his ear. Lucas's instinct told him to check it out, to follow the sound until he found the source. His training pushed him forward, but then his gaze fell back to the crumpled sheet of rules in his pocket. Do not investigate. He stood frozen, torn between reason and fear, until the whispering ceased. The silence returned, colder now, purposeful, as though something unseen had acknowledged him. Lucas retreated to his desk, hands shaking slightly. He unfolded the rules again, staring at the bold letters. For the first time, he wondered if the sheet wasn't a joke at all, but a warning, and in that moment, he realized he was trapped in more than just a job. The whispers didn't leave him alone. They threaded through the nights like veins beneath the skin of the library, surfacing when the clock passed midnight. By the third shift, Lucas had stopped pretending they weren't real. He could hear them as clearly as he heard his own breath. He sat hunched over the monitors, every screen showing endless corridors, the same sterile shelves and empty aisles. Yet the voices seemed to crawl between the images, weaving in and out of the static hum. Lucas opened the bottom drawer of the security desk, searching for distraction, maybe even a misplaced radio. Instead, his hand touched something stiff and worn. He pulled out a leather-bound journal, its corners frayed, the surface marked by faint water stains. The first page carried a name, David H. Security, 1997. Lucas frowned. He'd never heard of a David on staff. The entries began harmlessly. Enough. Notes about patrols, late-night student incidents. But within a few pages, the tone shifted. June 4th. Heard the voices again. Female, crying. Checked the stacks. Empty. They told me not to look. I think I made a mistake. Lucas's skin prickled. He flipped ahead. July 19th. The girl is back. Dark. Hair. Pale face. Doesn't belong here. She was on camera in the basement, but when I went down, no one was there. The director knows more than he's telling. Lucas slammed the journal shut, chest tightening. He forced himself to check the monitors. His eyes swept each frame until he froze. There, on camera, 12. A figure stood at the end of a long hall, hair draped forward, posture wrong, too still. Lucas blinked, leaning closer. The frame flickered. The figure was gone. He whispered aloud, "Jesus Christ." "Problem, officer." Lucas flinched. The library director stood in the doorway, suit perfectly pressed, his presence as sudden as the figure on the screen. Lucas slid the journal halfway beneath a stack of reports, trying to mask his unease. Just noise on the cameras. Thought I saw something. The director stepped closer, eyes cold. "What did I tell you about the rules?" Lucas hesitated. "You're telling me not to answer phones, not to check noises. And now I'm seeing people that aren't there. What am I supposed to do? Just sit here?" The man's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, voice low. "You follow the rules. That's how you survive this job." Lucas swallowed hard. The way he said it carried no metaphor. Survive. When the director left, the silence felt heavier, suffocating. Lucas turned slowly back to the monitors. On camera 7, the static hissed, and for the briefest moment, he saw her again. The pale girl, closer this time, standing just beyond the edge of the frame. The whispering returned, threading along the walls of the office, curling around him like smoke. Lucas reached for the journal again, but his hand trembled. The rules weren't quirks, they were warnings, and now the walls themselves seemed eager to see if he would break one. The phone rang at 12:01 a.m. Lucas stared at it, pulse hammering in his throat. The shrill sound cut through the silence of the library like a blade. He didn't move at first. He just sat there frozen, watching the black handset vibrate against the desk. Rule 1. Never answer the phones after midnight. The ringing went on, each shriek louder than the last, each one burrowing into him. He clenched his fists. He could almost hear the journal whispering in the back of his mind. David's words about mistakes, about the girl. What if this was her? Finally, Lucas snapped. His hand shot out and lifted the receiver. "Hello?" His voice cracked. Static filled the line at first, rushing like a tide. Then a voice, a girl's voice, fragile, trembling. "Help me." Lucas sat forward, knuckles white around the receiver. "Who is this?" "They locked me in," she whispered, her words breaking into sobs. "I can't get out. Please. It's dark in the walls. Don't leave me here." His stomach turned. "The walls?" "Yes." A sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Behind the shelves. I'm not supposed to be here. They know." The line crackled, distorting her words. Lucas pressed the phone harder to his ear. "Where are you exactly? Tell me where." But before she could answer, the monitors flickered. Every screen turned to static, then blinked back. And there she was. The pale girl. Not at a distance now. No. She was standing directly behind his chair in camera 1. Lucas's heart thudded. He spun around. The office was empty. The phone hissed. Her voice was a whisper again. "They'll come for you too." He dropped the receiver as if it burned him. Moments later, the director appeared in the doorway, face grave, eyes narrowing, at the dangling phone. "You answered it." Lucas's breath came in sharp bursts. "There's a girl. She's trapped. She needs help. You knew. You knew this all along." The director's gaze was ice. "She doesn't belong here. None of them do. The rules keep her contained. And now," he shook his head, "now she knows your name." Lucas's chest tightened, fury and fear colliding. "You let people vanish. Guards before me. David, what happened to him?" The director didn't answer. His silence was answer enough. The office lights flickered. The air grew colder, pressing against Lucas's skin like damp hands. The monitors flashed again, and the girl's face filled every screen, pale, hollow-eyed, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then, darkness. When the lights returned, the office chair was empty. The journal lay open on the desk, a fresh entry scrawled across the page in uneven ink. September 3rd. Lucas broke the first rule. He's with her now. The phone sat silent. The monitors showed nothing but still, endless halls. And the library, once again, was listening. Story number 5. The desert nights were supposed to be quiet. That was why Lucas had taken this job in the first place. To escape the noise in his head, the endless echoes of Afghanistan, the faces that wouldn't fade. Out here, 40 miles. From the nearest town, silence pressed against the chain-link fence like a blanket. But silence at a military warehouse was not comforting. It was suffocating. Briggs, his supervisor, had said little when he dropped Lucas off. The man was built like stone, jaw locked, eyes flat, a body carved from the kind of discipline that never loosened. He handed Lucas a ring of keys and pointed at the security shack, a concrete cube with a single bulb buzzing above the door. Inside, taped crookedly to the wall, was the list, the rules. Lucas read them twice, trying to process their clipped, almost childish tone. Never open. Door 9. If the alarm stops suddenly, do not enter the warehouse. Do not acknowledge anyone in uniform who isn't on the roster. He'd chuckled nervously. What is this? Initiation hazing. Briggs hadn't smiled. No, it's survival. Don't ask. Don't improvise. Don't break them. He leaned closer, voice a low rasp. Especially Rule 1. That had been hours ago. Now, alone in the shack, Lucas sat with the desert wind rattling the chain-link fence outside. The warehouse stretched across the sand like a sleeping beast, its metal siding glinting under the moonlight. The red numbers painted above each entry bay seemed to watch him. He tried to distract himself with the logbook, but his eyes kept drifting, back to the taped sheet of rules. His throat tightened every time he read Door 9. Why number it at all if it was never to be touched? At 01:12, the sound came, a thud. Then another, metal reverberating through the air. Lucas stiffened, staring at the security monitors. Camera 9 flickered, grainy black and white, showing the door at the far end of the warehouse. A shape leaned against it. The banging grew louder, deliberate. Lucas grabbed the radio. "Briggs, you copy?" Static. Nothing. Then, clearer than "the wind," came a voice. "Hey, open up! They locked me in!" Lucas froze, staring at the monitor. The man wore desert fatigues, face shadowed, fists hammering the steel. His voice cracked with desperation. "Please, let me out. I'm not supposed to be here." Lucas's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to move, to help. He knew that tone. He'd heard it from pinned down soldiers begging for backup, from men who hadn't made it. But the rules. His gaze darted back to the list on the wall, those black letters underlined twice. Never open door 9. The soldier pounded, harder, voice ragged now. "Don't leave me in here, they'll kill me." Lucas's hand hovered over the keys, sweat slicking his palm. He could hear his own pulse in his ears. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the banging stopped. On the monitor, the doorway was empty. Lucas stumbled back, heart hammering, the silence louder than any scream. He turned toward the taped rules, the edges fluttering in the draft. Rule 1 stared back at him, but for the first time, Lucas wondered. What exactly was behind door 9? Lucas barely slept after the pounding stopped. The monitors stayed quiet, but his nerves didn't. Every creak of the shack, every whisper of desert wind felt alive, like the rules themselves were breathing down his neck. When Briggs returned at dawn, Lucas didn't mention the soldier. He wanted to, but Briggs's face was unreadable stone, and something inside told him to hold back. That night, though, the quiet didn't last long. It was just past midnight when the alarms went dead. Not a blare, not a malfunction, just a sudden, choking silence. The red lights above the shack blinked twice, then froze. Lucas stared at the control panel. Shit! The rules came back instantly. If the alarms stop suddenly, do not enter the warehouse. And yet, what if someone was inside? A faint knock pulled him from his thoughts. This time it wasn't on a monitor. It was at the shack door. Lucas's breath caught. Slowly, he opened the blinds. A soldier stood outside, desert fatigues catching the moonlight, his face pale but calm. He wasn't the frantic man from door 9. His uniform was clean, pressed, and unfamiliar. Lucas cracked the door. "You're not on the roster," he said carefully. The man smiled faintly. "I was transferred in. They didn't update you yet." His voice was calm, steady, but something about the way his eyes never blinked made Lucas's stomach knot. "The rules," Lucas began. "Rules," the soldier cut in, stepping closer, "are for men who don't know the truth." Lucas gripped the doorframe. "Truth about what?" The man tilted his head. "What they're hiding in there. Door 9. You heard it, didn't you?" Lucas's chest tightened. He hadn't told anyone. He hadn't said a word about the pounding, about the voice screaming to be let out. And yet this man knew. How? Do you? The soldier leaned in, his breath cold against the night air. "Because I was the one inside." Lucas froze. His pulse roared in his ears. The soldier's face was close now, too close, and his expression never changed, calm, almost rehearsed. "That door doesn't hold cargo," the man whispered. "It holds secrets, men like me, mistakes they don't want you to know about." Lucas tried to step back, but the soldier's hand shot out, gripping the door before it could close. For the first time, Lucas saw something beneath the sleeve, skin that wasn't whole. It was charred, blackened, like flesh melted to bone. The soldier smiled wider. Do you still think the rules are meant to protect them? Or you? Lucas's throat locked. He wanted to radio Briggs, to slam the door, to do anything but stand frozen under that stare. But then, without warning, the soldier let go. He stepped back into the desert shadows, voice drifting on the wind. Midnight, Lucas. Door 9. Don't be late. The alarms suddenly roared back to life, red lights pulsing as if nothing had happened. Lucas staggered back into the shack, his mind unraveling. The rules weren't just orders, they were warnings. And now he knew something behind door 9 was waiting for him. By the third night, Lucas couldn't shake the words. Midnight. Door 9. He told himself he wouldn't go. He told himself the soldier was a hallucination, maybe PTSD playing tricks. But as the clock dragged toward 12, something in his gut, equal parts dread and compulsion, pulled him toward the warehouse. The alarms hummed steady, red lights flashing their slow rhythm. He scanned the roster. No one knew. Briggs hadn't mentioned a transfer. Still, Lucas left the shack, his boots crunching against the gravel. The desert stretched silent, the stars sharp above the shadowed compound. At door 9, his pulse thundered. The steel was dented, scarred, as if something inside had once fought to escape. The soldier's words clawed back. It doesn't hold cargo. It holds mistakes. His hand hovered over the keypad. The rules screamed in his head. Never open door 9. Lucas. The voice behind him made him whip around. Briggs stood there, face lit red in the alarm glow. His expression was hard, but not surprised. He knew. You saw him, Briggs said flatly. Not a question. Lucas's mouth was dry. Who is he? Briggs stepped closer, his shadow long against the wall. Not who. What? Door 9 isn't storage, it's containment. That thing you saw was a soldier once, part of a program that went wrong. Lucas's stomach turned. A program? Briggs's jaw clenched. They wanted soldiers who couldn't die, who'd fight through anything, burn them, shoot them, starve them. It didn't matter. They'd keep moving. But they lost themselves. No pain, no fear, no loyalty, just hunger. Lucas staggered back. The pounding he'd heard, the charred arm. Suddenly it all made sense. Why keep them here? Lucas demanded. Because the desert hides things, Briggs said coldly. And because someone has to watch them. Lucas looked at the door again, bile rising. So the rules are to keep you alive, Briggs snapped. His eyes bored into Lucas's. You follow them. You make it through the night. You break them. The alarms cut out. Silence. Both men froze. Then from behind the steel came the low scrape of movement. A dragging sound, wet and heavy. Lucas's breath hitched. The door shuddered once, dust falling from its frame. Briggs raised his rifle, his face grim. It knows you're here! Another slam shook the metal. This time, a voice followed. Lucas. The same calm tone, the same unblinking patience. Open the door. You want to, don't you? Lucas staggered back, every nerve screaming. His mind split. Obey Briggs, or obey the voice that somehow knew his name, his thoughts. The steel groaned, warping outward. Just enough for a hand, burned, skeletal, to push through the gap. Fingers clawed at the air. Help me, the voice whispered, almost gentle now. I can give you peace, Briggs shouted. Don't listen. Run. But Lucas couldn't move. His eyes locked on the hand, on the promise in its voice. The door shrieked, tearing wider, and then blackness. The alarms howled back to life, lights, strobing violently. When dawn came, the shack was empty. Briggs's rifle lay abandoned in the dirt, and door 9 hung open.